Good morning to everyone. Today we will discuss the battery state of charge estimation using machine learning for the 910A project course. Talha, Kamran and Chacko and Nemesh are the members of our group. So without any further ado, let's get to today's outline. In here, today we are going to talk about the motivations, current methods, objectives, data structure, data preparation, and future engineering for the engineering constraints approach, primary neural network, experimental results on deep learning neural network, CNN and LSTM, results summary, and further future works and conclusion. In this research, we examine the enhance of state of charge estimate problem for lithium-ion batteries utilizing machine learning techniques. Battery state of charge performs the same function as the fuel gauge in a gas-powered car, indicating how much energy is remaining inside the battery to power a vehicle. However, properly measuring state of charge is difficult undertaking since it cannot be measured directly due to the nonlinear time-varying properties and electrochemical process. Furthermore, battery state of charge is impacted by age, temperature variation, charge-discharge cycle, and so on. The benefits of using AI artificial intelligence are that it usually does not require a deep understanding of the problem because it automatically infers the nonlinear relationship to predict the output value using the input provided, and it's usually used when the problem is too complex to be solved analytically or with a standard program. In this slide, we are going to talk about the current methods which we use while undergoing this project. The methods are Coulomb, Kalman, and machine learning methods. Moving to the first point, Coulomb counting is well-known method for calculating the state of charge that is considered accurate if the battery capacity and initial stage of charge are unknown. The Coulomb counting method on the other hand is prone to mistake from several causes, the amount of which has not been investigated in the literature. The state of charge estimate error during Coulomb counting is technically constructed and quantified owing to four categories of error sources. The first one is current measure error, the second one is current integration approximation error, the third point is battery capacity uncertainty, and the fourth point is timing oscillator error. Moving to the second point, this method is extremely strong position tool since it can receive many forms of input, solve a large number of parameters, and generate trustworthy and precise results. The Kalman filter and extended Kalman filter are both employed in robotics, where they are used in trajectory tracking, position estimation, and manipulator robots, SL, simultaneous localization and mapping, and object identification, among other things, depending on the model's linearity or nonlinearity. Moving to the third point, machine learning and deep learning are two of the most well-known subfields of artificial intelligence, have grown in popularity of scientific studies due to their capacity to tackle complicated problems without having a person to design incredibly difficult algorithms. Machine learning is collection of mathematical techniques that includes linear regression, curve filtering methods, clustering algorithms, support vector machines, decision trees, Bayesian learning, and neural networks. Deep learning is a subsection of machine learning since it focuses on artificial neural networks meant to mimic how people think and learn. This results in the development of sophisticated neural networks such as convolutional neural network, restricted Boltzmann machines, autoencoders, and recurrent neural network, among others. long short term memory and recurrent unit.
This project uses a publicly available dataset prepared by researchers at McMaster University in Ontario, Canada. They use an LG HG2 18650 cell with a nominal capacity of 3000 milliamp hours and a nominal voltage of 3.7 volts. For the tests are performed on a variety of ambient temperatures starting from 40 degrees Celsius all the way down to minus 20 degrees Celsius. They simulate a variety of drive cycles such as the UDDS, LA92, US06, and a mixed cycle that combines all of these randomly. As you can see in the figure, on the left, it shows the UDDS discharge cycle at minus 10 degrees Celsius, and you can see how the voltage decreases over time, and you can also observe the current, the temperature, and the state of charge of the battery. The dataset contains these columns. It contains the timestamp, it contains the status, which indicates if the battery is at rest or if it's charging or discharging. It contains the procedure that's being used, the voltage at any point in time during the test, the measured current, temperature, and capacity. Data preparation and feature engineering is an important part of machine learning. To serve the data processing requirements of different models, we created a routine that could accept different processing arguments. So this included resampling the charge and discharge cycles to 1 Hertz, calculating the SOC percentage, and also calculating other additional features such as power and the average values of voltage, of current, and of power using a 500-second rolling window. The pair plot shown on the left helps understand the nature of the data and the relationship between them. The diagonal histogram that you see on the top left and going along the diagonal shows which values of a signal are more present. For voltage, for example, the value 4.2 is predominant. As you can see with the temperature, the data from the 25 degrees Celsius tests are predominant compared to those from the minus 10, 0, or 10 degrees Celsius. It is also observed that the voltage and the SOC, state of charge, have a linear relationship, which is not the case with neither current nor power. The next important step is data normalization. Normalization is the process of adjusting all signals in the dataset, including state of charge, to fit a common scale. It improves neural network model performance drastically by decreasing scale distortion among the values in the dataset. The two kinds of normalization utilized in this project are mean normalization and min-max normalization. Mean normalization scales the values so that their standard deviation is 1. Min-max normalization scales values so that their minimum and maximum values lie between 0 and 1 respectively. As you can see from the figure here, you can see that data distribution with no normalization is actually, there's no distribution, it's just lines and it's spread all over the scale. When you apply mean normalization, the features stand out a little more, and it's even better when you apply min-max normalization. To facilitate neural network training and inference, the prepared dataset is split into a train, validation, and test dataset. Of the 12 drive cycles available for each temperature, the training dataset uses all experiments comprised of the mixed cycles, and there are 8 mixed cycles, so this represents 66% of the data available. The test dataset uses all the experiments comprised of the UDDS, the US06, LA92, and HWFET datasets, and that comprises 33% of the data available. When training of the neural network begins, 20% of the training dataset is set aside for validation. After every training epoch, the model is inferred against the validation dataset to record loss metrics.
The figure on the right shows how algorithm works, or how machine learning basically works. So as you can see, there are n epochs. So at each epoch, the training dataset is fed, it is a forward propagation, and then loss is calculated. Then after that, it is back propagated, and at each epoch, this is done to train the dataset. When the training is done, that trained model is fed the testing dataset, and then predictions are made. Now we'll see the different terms that are important for machine learning. So several input channels that are fed to the neural network are called features. So in our case, we had a lot of features like voltage and current, etc. Then The channel that the neural network will learn to predict during training is called prediction label. In our case, it was SOC. Then the dataset is split into smaller branches, both during training and testing. This is typically set to 32 and are called batch size. If there are n features, then the model is fed n into 32 data points in each batch. Epochs is one cycle of training the entire dataset. This is defined arbitrarily by setting up the model and is increased or decreased as required. A model is a stack of several layers. There are input layers, hidden layers, and output layer. To get better training outcomes, our project uses popular Adam optimization algorithm. The rate at which weights are updated during backpropagation is called learning rate. We use a learning rate of 0.001. Then activation function is a non-linear function that is computed against each unit of a hidden layer. It is this non-linearity that allows the model to fit non-linear predictions. In this project, the rectified linear unit ReLU is used for DNN and CNN, while scaled exponential linear unit CeLU is used for LSTM. Loss function computes the error between predicted label and actual label, and the objective of training is to minimize this function. Let me explain the constraints that we faced and the approach that we had for all the algorithms. So some of the main constraints that we faced were time and money. All algorithms take a long time to train and make predictions. A better graphic card in laptops or computers provide faster processing times, but we did not have the latest hardware for this purpose. We used free version of Google Colab. It provided us RAM and GPU allocation, but it was still slow and could not be permanently allocated. This caused us to run code again and again and increased our time spent on coding. Online tools were not as fast as local hardware in our laptops, but because of different PCs owned by group members, processing times were less for some, but very large for others. So next, we look at the approach that we had. The approach to neural network architecture selection, dataset processing, and results was an experimental approach. The training of each architecture starts by using a small model topology while experimental with the train and test datasets. So we selected groups of recorded charging and discharging datasets. And then after initial results were recorded, 1 to 2 variables such as model topology or dataset sampling rate or feature selection was modified. And then the experiment was run again. At each step, observations and metrics were recorded. In this way, several experiments were run and conclusion on the optimal data processing steps and model topology were made.
As mentioned previously, we implemented an experimental approach when running tests against each architecture type. For this first set of experiments, we will look at the deep neural network. In this experiment, the training and test datasets are resampled to 1 Hz and concatenated together. Mean normalization is then applied on the concatenated dataset. The DNN model uses 2 fully connected hidden layers with 64 units in each layer. Both the hidden layers use a ReLU activation function. The training of this model took over 25 epochs and took 12 minutes to complete. Now you can see that although the model fit the training dataset well, as you can see with the training MAE being 2.5%, you can see that the mean absolute error against the validation and testing datasets was 5.92 and 4.5%, which means it didn't fit that too well. You can also see that with this figure on the right, you can see that for this 25 degrees Celsius portion of the test dataset, you can see that the predicted value is quite close to actual, which shows that we get a good result, but maybe not the best result. Now in this next experiment, the 1 Hz resampled training and test datasets, model topology, hyperparameters, they're all kept the same as the previous experiment 1. However, instead of mean normalization, we apply min-max normalization. So as we said before, with this, all features are scaled to have their values between 1 and 0. With this dataset, the training of the deep neural network took for 25 epochs took 10 minutes to complete. Using min-max normalization definitely shows an improvement over experiment 1, as you can see with the lower training mean absolute error, the lower validation and testing mean absolute errors. You can see that for this 25 degrees Celsius portion shown on the right, you can see that there is some deviation that's a little more compared to what we saw previously, but overall For the full data set, you can see that the errors are much lower compared to the mean normalization test. Now for this last experiment with deep neural networks, the model topology, hyperparameters again, are all kept the same as the previous two experiments. However, instead of 1 Hz resample data, we use the raw discharge cycles for both training and testing. Now to note, we don't use the charge cycles here, we just use the discharge cycles. Now, since it is raw data that we're using, the signals are inherently much more noisier, and so we expect to get poorer results with this experiment. Once all the drive cycles are concatenated, the dataset is normalized using min-max normalization, and the training of the dataset over 25 epochs took over 1 hour and 10 minutes to complete. Now you can see that although the train and validation mean absolute errors are low, you can see that the model shows a higher percentage of error against the test dataset. And you can also see this with the graph on the right. You can see that the predicted value is higher than the actual value. And you can see that for the first 2 discharge cycles, you can see that it's higher, then it's about the same, and then it goes higher again. So this shows a little worse result compared to the previous 2 results that we saw with deep neural networks.
Let's look at some of the CNN experiments now. First was done using mean normalized dataset. The training of the model over 25 epochs took 15 minutes to complete. The figure below shows the trend of the training and validation loss against the training routine. It can be observed from the figure on the left that validation loss remains high throughout the training process. The figure on the right shows prediction against the actual state of charge at 25 degrees Celsius. Overall, it looks like the model predicts the state of charge values really well. Next, instead of mean normalization, minimum maximum normalization was used. The training of the CNN model over 25 epochs took 12 minutes to complete. The figure on the left shows the trend of training and validation loss over training routine. And the validation loss in this experiment is much lower compared to the validation loss observed in the first CNN experiment, and is closer to the training loss. As with the first experiment, the model predicts the state of charge values really well. Instead of resample data, however, the raw discharge cycles are used for both training and testing with the charge cycles excluded. Given that the signals are inherently noisier compared to resample data, poorer prediction results were expected in experiment number 3. Although the model trains really well against the training dataset, as seen with the low training and validation loss, the testing loss is really high. The same behavior was observed with the TNN model and with CNN when raw values were fed. This is likely due to the noisy nature of raw dataset used. If we see the LSTM experiments that were performed, the first LSTM experiment is a small LSTM model with 2 hidden layers. The training of the model over 75 epochs took 1 hour and 15 minutes to complete. The training and validation loss metrics show a significant decrease within the first 4 to 5 epochs, then lower gradually from there on. The figure below shows the predicted and actual SOC plotted together over several drive cycles between 25 degrees and -10 degrees on the test dataset. As observed along several drive cycles, the predicted SOC values are lower than the actual SOC values. The second experiment with LSTM uses a larger model with 4 hidden layers. The training of the model over 75 epochs took 10 hours to complete. That's a long time. The figure on the right shows the predicted and actual SOC plotted together over several drive cycles between 25 and -10 degrees Celsius. As observed, along with several drive cycles, the predicted SOC values are higher than the actual SOC values. In the final LSTM experiment, the model topology and hyperparameters are kept the same as in experiment 2. However, the average values of voltage and current are included. Power is still excluded. The training of the model over 75 epochs took 10 hours to complete. The training, validation, and test mean absolute errors are the lowest among the previous 2 LSTM experiments. This further proves the importance of feature engineering. The right figure shows the predicted and actual SOC plotted together over several drive cycles between 25 and -10, and compared to the previous 2 experiments, the predicted SOC values closely match actual SOC values. So in this slide, the results from all 9 experiments were explored using DNN, CNN, and LSTM architectures, each with their separate data configurations. The experiments show that Both DNN and CNN can model the SOC using simpler model topologies and resample data. In fact, using raw data on these models returned worse prediction results. LSTM model gave better prediction outcomes even with noisier raw data. The best result in the form of lowest strain validation and test mean absolute error from each of these architecture is summarized in the table. The DNN model using minimum maximum normalization gave the best training loss, while CNN model with minimum maximum normalization gave the best validation and testing loss. Although the LSTM MAE is higher for all three, the result can be considered optimal given that it was predicting over noisy raw signal values. One other factor to be considered is processing times. On same hardware, CNN took only 10 to 15 minutes to train, while DNN took around 1 to 2 hours and LSTM over 10 hours. Therefore, considering every aspect, CNN performs best results.
Now let's talk about some future avenues that we could look at with this project. The first one is reducing overfitting and underfitting. Now you might have noticed with the DNN and CNN experiments, the validation loss was usually much higher compared to the training loss, and this usually signifies overfitting on the training dataset. Now there are some techniques to overcome those like regularization and dropout. We did try some of those while working on this report, but we were not able to get satisfactory results. And this is still an area that we have to look at. The next one is hyperparameter tuning, where we use the TensorFlow library to experiment with a number of different hyperparameters to come up with a better model topology automatically. This is something we couldn't look into as part of this project, but this is something that might help us yield a more better model topology in the future. Now let's summarize this project. We carried out experiments on a wide temperature range between -10 degrees Celsius